It's Monday night.
I've been in the game a long time. When a catcher catches the ball and it's strike three, you call the guy out. It's that simple, isn't it?
And if it's Monday, it's the knee jerks.
I'm not going to sit here and rip umpires. But you saw what you saw, clearly saw what you saw. I just saw it for the 10th time. Write it and say something once in a while. Have the nerve to say something.
Detroit sports talk with attitude.
Attitude on three. 1, 2, 3. Attitude.
Coming up tonight, will Big Al guess whose birthday it is? Who are the jerks of the week? What will Eno rant about now? The answers coming up next. Two guys who know Detroit sports. The voice of reason, Greg Eno and Big Al Beaton.
It is Monday, September 14th, 2020. After a long pandemic-caused hiatus, the Knee Jerks are back. This is the Knee Jerks, Detroit sports talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster, blogger, and apparently now hermit. And joining me, as always, is my partner in crime. He's a Renaissance man. Apparently, he just lives by his fire pit in his backyard anymore, and that would be Greg Eno of the Winged Wheeler, Out of Bounds, and numerous places online. How's things, Greg? It's been a long time.
Aren't we all just living by our fire pit nowadays?
No kidding.
Yeah. I'm doing well. This is great to be back. I know this is the first show in about 5 months. We haven't done one since the
draft. NFL draft.
Breakdown of the NFL draft. Yep. And here we are, and it's good to be back. It's good to be talking to you, my friend. How you doing?
Pretty good. I can't complain too much, especially since quarantine was eased up. And it got pretty dicey there for a while. We'll talk about that as the show goes on. But overall, I can't complain, other than summer's ending. And I feel like it just got goddamn started, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Because we lost a lot of time, really. So, but we'll talk about all that. But everything's okay on your end as well?
Everything's going real well, thank you. I can be read, as Al indicated, on my Out of Bounds WordPress blog. You can also get there. It's Gregor63. No, I'm sorry. It's the Gregor63.wordpress.com or thegregor63.com will take you there as well. I come up with something new, usually about once a week. You can also find me on the Winged Wheeler, which is also on WordPress, as I write about hockey. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty much there every week on the WordPress blog there, and also you can find us on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and I'm on Twitter as well at Greg Eno. And Al will tell you later on how you can find us on the web with the podcasts and so forth. But we've got some stuff going on. We've got I have to confess, we're not gonna. I'm not. You know what, Al? I got to confess, I'm so rusty and so out of sorts that I did not prepare a whose birthday is it. So we're going to scrap that tonight.
We got to ease into these things.
I'm so rusty. I forgot how to do this.
Whose birthday is it? Hell if I know.
I don't have a lot to do in the production of the show, by the way. I just pretty much show up, and here I am. I can't even do the whose birthday is. So we'll skip that for this week. Our intention, by the way, if anybody's wondering what the game plan is here, is to indeed come back to you every couple of weeks, at least through the football season, and we'll see how it goes after that. There'll be some other things to be talking about other than football as this winter goes on. So we'll be here every 2 weeks. That's the game plan.
Give or take, because we're actually off schedule right now. If you realize, we're actually off our normal schedule because Linda is. Yeah. You usually record when Linda's working. That's for those familiar. That's my girlfriend who has had a hell of several months herself being a nurse, but. She's this is normally her week off, and we're normally up north. But we're not up north, and she's picking up overtime. So it might be 3 weeks. We'll have to look at the calendar.
That's fine.
2 or 3 weeks, we'll be in there. Hell, in 3 weeks, we might have a firing to talk about anyway. So, but it's we might as well just get right down to it. Since the last time we talked, this feels like the world has turned upside down for the most part. Because when we last talked, it was like, late April. The quarantine really hadn't been going on that long, the lockdown, however you want to put it. We weren't sure what was going to happen because the only sport that was even in a semi-normal state at that point, was the NFL because it was their off season, and they were able to do most of everything they needed to do. Online, like the NFL draft. It was all video, internet, and everything else. It was all virtual. So, in the meantime, since then, most sports have returned in one way or another, be it a bubble, be it adjusted schedules, or not playing at all, because college football is a mess. But I wanted to ask you, Greg. Did you really miss sports that much when everything was shut down?
That's a good question. I'm actually glad you asked that because I found myself not missing it all that much. I really didn't. I'm not sure if it's because the teams that we have are so bad.
Yeah, that plays something into it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the baseball season wasn't as big of a deal not having it as I thought it would be.
Well, and it's not the first time for that either. We've had a few of those in our lifetime.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. But even just having a ball game on in the background, I thought I might miss that. Mm-hmm. I found myself getting along just fine. I took a little bit of what I did with my blog, the aforementioned blog, was I brought back when there wasn't really a lot to write about. I brought back some. I would go back and pick out some of my favorite columns from the past and run those just because I just wanted to have something new to put out there, so to speak. But then I started picking up writing again a couple of months ago and started 2 or 3 months ago and started to do it. I found that there were some things to pontificate about. Yeah. But as far as watching sports, as you know, I'm a big tabletop sports guy, so I've kind of filled the void by playing my own games on my tabletop every night. Right. I didn't really have a lot of angst or pining for sports. How about you?
Honestly, I kind of felt the same way. It didn't bother me all that much, and like we said, I don't think it really the local teams being bad kind of played somewhat into it. It's not like we were in the middle of a season that was going to end in a championship run. I'm sure some other fan bases were very upset, like the NBA season got interrupted, but. I binge watched a few other things. Hell, I binge watched goddamn Adam 12 for Christ's sake. Things like that. I was able to. I think it comes down to if this had happened 20 or 30 years ago, I probably might have gone a little more crazier about missing sports. But there are so many other things to keep you occupied in today's world when it comes to streaming media, broadcast media, online media. As you said, video games, or you kept yourself occupied with tabletop games, games on our phones and tablets. There is so many more things that can keep us occupied that I was, despite literally not leaving my house for almost about 3.5 months, literally did not leave for 3.5 months, I was able to keep myself at least occupied enough where I wasn't pulling my hair out. And I did that without sports. As you said, usually sports is like right now. I got the NFL, the Monday Night NFL games on in the background right now, and that's the sort of thing that would normally have been, like I said, a May evening. You would have, as you said, you'd have the Tigers on TV in the background, or you'd have Dan Dickerson and Jim Price on the radio, listening to them. As you're doing other things, I just listened to something else. Podcasts, music. And there was just so much going on in the world during why this went down, specifically when it came to the Black Lives Matter protests and things like that. There was just so many other things that got my attention and that I was caught up in. Sports really would have taken a back seat anyway, and I think it did for a lot of people. And I have a feeling that much like how I know baseball probably lost fans because of the '94 strike, and they probably lost a generation because of that. I would not be surprised if today's pro sports leagues lost themselves some fans. And I'm not even for political reasons, even though there is a segment of the population that's like that. I just think that there's a large portion of the population that realize that I can find other things to do, and especially when it comes to the younger kids. We're old. We're set in our ways. We still watch broadcast television. I look at Linda's 17 and 12-year-old grandkids. They don't even watch TV. Everything's on their phone. Everything's on their tablet. Everything's on their computer. It's TikTok. It's YouTube. It's Zoom. Things like that. So I don't see how pro sports in general, Greg, their fan bases are aging, and the younger generations are not getting into it the way it did when we were 16 years old. And I don't think the pandemic is helping matters at all, because if I talked to my 17-year-old grandson, Linda's grandson, he didn't miss anything. He didn't care. He had other things to keep himself occupied. And I think that's going to be a bigger issue for pro sports as things go on. And I think the pandemic has just given them a taste of it. They got to figure things out. They got to make some changes.
Well, we in fairness, we're talking like this, talking about it like this, when we really, in the whole scheme of things, we're not talking about that long. I mean, this isn't something that if this were to go on another year and a half, they would necessarily feel the same way. Yeah. But I think in this relatively small sample size, and I know it doesn't seem like that because time does seem to have stood still, but really it wasn't really that long. I mean, I know how fast, like you said at the top of the show, how fast the summer has gone, and I agree with that. Mm-hmm. But that just adds to the whole notion of it really hasn't. When you really think about it, I mean, to go from March to September, it is 6 months, but it just wasn't. It's not. It's still to me a temporary thing, and I still think that sometime middle part of next year we may be back to. A little bit. I hate to say normal because I don't know that we'll ever be back. I don't know what that even means.
I think we're gonna have a new normal. That's for sure.
But I just think that it does go to show you that in a relatively a decent amount of time, people can find busy themselves with other things, and that's not a bad thing. They maybe some people maybe they picked up a hobby, maybe they started reading more.
There was a lot.
Maybe they did more.
I saw a lot of that online. More. You really did. People said, "I found some other things to do."
Maybe they got outside more. Maybe they exercised more. I mean, we can only hope. I don't know.
But it's. I didn't miss sports as much as I thought I would, and more than because there were so many things on my mind as it was. Like I didn't see Linda from right before lockdown till Memorial Day. That was like 3.5 months. And the only way I got to see her was on FaceTime. And thank goodness I had an old Apple tablet laying around, an iPad, because she's all Apple as it is, and I'm mostly Windows and Android, and I just happen to have this old iPad here. So that was the only way I was really able that we could see each other was for that. And there were so many other people that were caught in that same kind of boat. And, it was not easy because, she changed because her normal schedule is 6 on, 8 off. And that 8 off allows us to go every other week to go up to the cabin. Well, things got so nuts during that early parts of quarantine when COVID was really at its worst here in Michigan. She changed her schedule because she couldn't work 6 in a row. It was too crazy. It was too busy. It was too draining. Hell, it was too dangerous. Because I had one of the more sobering texts or messages I ever got in my life. This is right before Governor Whitmer ordered the lockdown, ordered quarantine. And I got a text from Linda at work. Her entire hospital had been overrun. This is back when the ER was filled up with COVID patients. The ICU was filled up with COVID patients. They could do nothing there but take care of COVID patients. And I got a text from her saying, "Do not leave the house. It is extremely dangerous." This is straight to me, and this is before before things really, before I think people realized how bad it was. The people who knew it was bad were people who were working in medicine. And she goes, "Do not leave the house. It is dangerous. This could kill you. Stay inside." And this is on a text from her in the middle of a shift. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, I knew it was serious, but when she put it that way. And then in the meantime, then I've had doctors tell me the same thing because I have a compromised immune system. COVID-19 could be a death sentence to me. So I've been super, super careful for the most part. Wearing a mask has become second nature. I don't leave the house that much. It really, the few places I feel safe, my own place, and when Linda and I are up at the cottage. Because they're easy places to social distance. Because we social distance very easily up north. We either take our groceries with us or we have them delivered. And then we're there. And there's no one near us. And we're on the lake. So it's a perfect place to essentially get away when the shit hits the fan, like things have over the last several months. But it was not easy. But I guess, kind of go back to your point, people can get used to anything, even as bad things got.
You returned to social media.
Yeah.
You were on social media.
I was gone. I was off social media for 5-6 years, and I went back to Facebook.
And I'm glad you did, because I enjoy. You have a lot to say, a lot of good stuff to say. I missed you on social media. Yeah. I never thought you'd come back. What made you decide to come back, by the way?
A couple things. One, it was an easier way to stay in touch with friends and family. That was probably the easiest way to stay in touch, because everybody's on Facebook for the most part. At least, I would say half the planet feels like it. But in my family, everybody's on Facebook one way or the other. And it gave me a place to vent, because I was not happy with the current federal administration, not happy with the White House. Orange man bad. I can't stand the man. I can't stand the GOP. I needed a vent. And we're always better to do it in Facebook where everybody else vents. So I have been able to tone down my political rhetoric, even though that's not changed how I feel. But it gave me a place to talk to people, gave me a place to stay in touch with people, gave me a place to vent about sports. Because we didn't do this, because there really wasn't a lot to talk about anyway, or would have just, or this podcast just would have turned into us bitching about the stupid shit leagues were doing, because there was no other sports going on. So, getting back on Facebook was just a convenient way for a little bit of companionship, I guess is a good way to put it. Because I was here by myself, literally. Couldn't see Linda, not seeing my family. Even though like my mother lives like 5 minutes away, I still don't see her that often. So it was, go back to social media was just a way to stay in touch with people more than anything else. And I'm kind of glad I did, even though the worst thing about getting back on Facebook, Greg, was finding out that a lot of the people I went to high school with, who I know a lot of us have friends from high school and Facebook, are right-wing lunatics. And so there was a lot of unfollowing, a lot of unfriending, a lot of blocking, but it kind of goes with the territory nowadays, unfortunately.
Yep, unfortunately is right.
Well, how did you handle things? I know you were able to work from home, so I'm sure that helped you immeasurably. So, and you had your wife, you had Bean, your daughter, so at least you weren't treading water by yourself.
No, not at all. Working from home, I'm just thankful that I have a job where I can work from home, and we're going to be doing that through the rest of this year. Probably, I'm guessing, quite a bit into 2021. Hey, I tell you what. One thing I'm looking forward to. I love the fall. I love the crispness and the. I love a lot of things about the fall. What I didn't like about the fall was because in Michigan it's always followed by the winter, and I'm not a big proponent of snow and driving in snow and shoveling and so forth to go to work and so forth. But knowing now that I don't have to worry about going to the office every day this winter. I can stay home in my cozy home. I don't care if it's 6 feet of snow outside. I can stay home, do my thing, not have to worry about driving across town. So I'm actually looking forward to this fall more than any other, because I know I'm not dreading what's coming after it, because I can work from the comfort of my own home, and I'm thankful for that. I know there's not one day that I take that for granted, because I know there are a lot of people out there who've lost their jobs, or are significantly underemployed because of the situation. So I am not for 1 second. I don't take that for granted. But I am glad that I have that opportunity to do that, and I think we'll see more and more people work from home as this, as I think a lot of companies have realized that they can be productive.
Do they really need the overhead of all these huge offices when apparently people are staying productive working remote for the most part? I'm sure there are times where you may ultimately need to go in occasionally, but there's no reason for a lot of people to go in 5 days a week, 8-9 hours a day. There's just no reason to.
Yeah, I mean, in my job in communications, you do miss some of the collaborative aspects of it and the brainstorming, and you can do that only so much on a Teams call or a Skype call. It's hard to replicate that person-to-person energy you get in a conference room, but we're making it work, and we'll see what happens. But anyhow, we have a lot to talk about in about less than an hour here, so I guess we should get to it.
Well, one more thing.
Yeah.
Did you watch when things started to gradually come back? Like the first things that come back were like NASCAR, the PGA Tour, golf. Like remember they had that special. I think Rory McIlroy and 3 other golfers got together for a special match on television. Did you take a look at stuff you wouldn't normally watch just because it was sports in general?
I didn't watch things I normally watch, let alone things I don't normally watch. I haven't watched 1 minute of the NBA playoffs or the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Really?
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about that, thank God. We're here to talk about things that I have watched. But I just, again,
know what I did watch? Cornhole. That was actually surprisingly entertaining on ESPN, little things like that. But I will admit I did watch NASCAR, but then again, growing up in Monroe County, Flat Rock has a short track speedway, so I grew up going and watch stock car racing. So I do keep an eye on NASCAR, so I did watch some of that, but I could not make myself to watch the virtual iRacing that they had before they brought back before the tracks reopened up. So I'll watch some racing. I'm not going to watch video game racing, no. So then again, I'm old, you're old, and I'm sure I still can't figure out why people watch other people play video games, which is essentially what the iRacing was. But I will admit that I haven't watched them with an eagle eye like I may have in the past, like the NBA and the NHL playoffs. But I gotta say, the one thing I really did like and enjoy was when early on in both their playoffs, they had in the bubble, when they had games starting at like 1 o'clock and going all day till like 11 o'clock midnight, because they were just going one after the other in the bubble. And it was almost like an NCAA tournament feeling, which I kind of enjoyed, that even if I wasn't watching per se really closely, I could put it on and keep an eye on things, and it gave me a little bit of a sense of normalcy, which I enjoyed. But, and not helping, as we said, that the Pistons and Red Wings ultimately probably aren't going to play any kind of a game for almost a year, the way they, maybe 10 months or so at the very least for those two teams. So it was hard to get wrapped up into what's going on. But at the very least, I'm glad it was there. And they did it the correct way, where in the bubble, and they were very, very, I would admit that I am glad they came down hard on guys who broke the bubble. So if they were going to do it, the NBA and the NHL deserve all kinds of credit for being able to finish their seasons and not having to deal with outbreaks of COVID-19, unlike college football and like Major League Baseball, and I'm sure we're going to see in the NFL. But, again, new normal. So.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I haven't got into it, Al, is the notion of basketball in September, hockey in September.
Yeah, that plays into it too, because this is football, baseball time. It really is.
Yeah, it just and I think that's why I'm enjoying the football thing, because it's something that's actually happening on time when it's supposed to happen. And basketball in August, hockey in August, I just do
you think the lack of crowds played anything into it, to your interest in games?
Yeah, that's another good question. It's no. I know we're going to talk about crowd noise being pumped in the Lions game, but no, I don't find that. I didn't find that to be. I don't find that. I don't think that's it. I don't pay too much attention to the crowd that much when I'm watching a game. Although to not have any reaction at all is a little bit weird. You don't know what. You don't know who's the home team and who's the road team. Of course,
there's no home court advantage in the NHL and the NBA right now.
Yeah, the NBA is kind of like a summer league thing now, with with not being a home, not having.
That's exactly how I described it the first time I saw it. Yeah. Saw the bubble games. Exactly what it looked like, a summer league game in a gym, which is essentially what it is. That's essentially what they're playing in.
Thank you.
So I'm completely with you there. It really did reminded me of essentially, it looked like summer league played in around video boards, which is essentially really what it is. So and the NHL, I will admit, I think I've watched the NHL a little bit closer, but I haven't really missed the fans all that much in the NHL either, because the hockey I've watched has been pretty damn entertaining. And when it comes down to it, I don't feel as guilty watching the NBA and the NHL, because I think they did it right. And, they spent a shit ton of money, but they quarantined and they made sure to put no one at risk, unlike some of the other sports we're watching right now. But in the end, that all brings us to the NFL, which has started in earnest this weekend. Well, football in general started in earnest this weekend, and we got to see our first Lions game since, January? First week of January, give or take. And, I could just dig up my notes from that podcast. or the one from a year ago about now, from the Arizona game. Because, as I put it in the notes for this podcast, Greg, the Lions game was next verse, same as the first. And especially for all the talk of the Lions, when they were finally able to get to their trimmed down training camp, and there was all the talk about this team starting to buy into the Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn way, and and to their credit, they were really the first team in sports to protest the Jacob Blake shooting, which led to games actually being canceled in NBA and Major League Baseball and the NHL. So there's a lot of talk that yes, there's unity, there's chemistry, they're buying into Matt Patricia, and then on Sunday, the Lions blew a 23-6 fourth quarter lead versus world-beating Mitch Trubisky, and the Bears losing 27-23 by allowing the Bears to score 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns, while the Lions essentially continued to shoot themselves in the dick, or the foot, however you want to put it. So the parallels, Greg, to the Lions blowing a large fourth-quarter lead in last season's season opener against the Cardinals you can't ignore it. It was deja vu all over again. And even if DeAndre Swift doesn't drop the game-winning pass, which hit him right in the hands and it would have won the game, it still wouldn't excuse the fact that the Lions pissed away a big lead and had to put themselves, in panic mode, trying to recover and score with no time left on the clock. So, for all the fans base that got fired up, we haven't seen football in so long. There's going to be a sense of normalcy. And it turned out, Greg, the only sense of normalcy I got was that I was pissed at the Lions on Sunday afternoon. So that's old school. That's everything's A-OK normal when I'm mad at the Lions at about 4:30. But it was just more of the same. And at this point, even this team, they're going to win a game. They're going to win games. Just Matthew Stafford's going to win a handful of games for him. But even still, I don't see it. I think this game, to a lot of people who are willing to give Matt Patricia the benefit of the doubt, I think this game eliminated the last of his goodwill, if he had any left to begin with.
Well, the NFL does not give a lot of quarter to teams that take their foot off the gas pedal. I mean, that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. You have to play for 60 minutes, and you have to keep your foot on the gas. And there were a couple of coaching decisions we can talk about in a second that probably contributed to this as well. But they didn't. It was the same old thing. They didn't make the plays. They dropped interceptions. They had a couple of ill-timed penalties. They got a little bit too conservative, the whole 9 yards. The fourth quarter, if you look at just the stats of just the fourth quarter alone, I'm sure it would be quite painful to look at in terms of the discrepancy in first downs, yardage, the whole 9 yards. Bears 21-0 in the quarter. I read all that too about Patricia and about players buying in. This is the closest knit team he's had here, and I immediately dismissed all that kind of talk. That's a bunch of baloney. You can say whatever you want about that kind of stuff. It matters what you do on Sunday afternoon. Doesn't matter anything else. I just thought that they, at times for the first 45 minutes looked very good and looked like a really good football team for 45 minutes. Yeah. And then, one of the announcers mentioned it in the fourth quarter. They said, you have to wonder if some of that fourth quarter stuff from last year, does that seep into your thinking at all. And, on the one hand, you like to think that no, it doesn't. These are professional athletes. That was last year. A lot of the players from last year's team are gone. Some coaches are gone. There are new players. I understand that. And a lot of those games happened when Stafford wasn't healthy anyway. And so on the one hand, you kind of dismiss that and say, no, that can't. I mean, that's last year. That's over and done with. How could there possibly be a carryover through all this other stuff that's gone on? But it looked like that they just played like they were trying not to lose. And I know that's what it can look like when a team is making a comeback on you. But it really did look like they were trying not to lose. Although I will say that after having said that, I guess we'll get into the coaching right now. I don't know what your thought was on the 55-yard field goal attempt by Prater. Here I am saying play not to lose, but at the same time I would have pooch punted right there. I don't know that I would have given the Bears a chance with the football at the 45-yard line, their own 45, only down by 10 at that point. I think I might have pooched it, pinned him deep, make him go for, and even if it's a touchback, you at least get it at the 20. Make him go at least 80 yards, if not longer, and which takes up more time. Off the clock and so forth. And so I thought that was I know that it seems to contradict what I'm saying because they were going for more points, but I think the smart move there, I said at the time, it wasn't 2020 hindsight. I said at the TV, I said, I think I would have pooch punched there. I know Jonathan Vilma, the color commentator, advocated for the field goal attempt because he was of the mindset of, just keep trying to get more points. I understand that, but it was not a chip shot. I know Prater's got a good leg and he did indeed get it there. He just hit the upright. What are you going to do? But I just thought that gave the Bears unnecessarily. You didn't really need the 3 points there as much as you needed. What you needed there with a 10-point lead was the clock and field position. Yeah. And they gave up both. They didn't get anything. I mean, they didn't get the points or the clock or field position. They gave up all three at one time. So that was a miscalculation. I think I appreciate the wanting to get more points. But I think the better discretion was the better part of valor there, and they should have gone for a pooch punt.
Yeah, and that plays into one of the big mistakes of the game is that if Matt Stafford just unloads the ball rather than eating a sack, that's a 44-yard field goal attempt, and it's good because he hit the damn upright from 55. So, that's what that was. It turned out to be a big turning point in the game, and I can understand what you're thinking there is, especially after the sack. If he doesn't take the sack and it's it turns out to be a kick from the mid 40s, that 10 yards is a huge difference. That turns it in from probably an 80% kick to a 50 or 40% kick. I mean, that's a big difference. When you're talking, 43, 44 yards to 55, 56. Even as good of a leg as Prater has, and he's spoiled us over the years over his ability to hit those long kicks, but they're still, for the most part, a coin flip. So I can buy into if there was a time to be conservative, that was the time to be conservative. So essentially, Patricia was conservative at the wrong times and aggressive at the wrong times. And if you'd flipped the scenario around, we're probably talking about a Lions win at this point. Because, like I said, it just wasn't, as good as they looked at times during that game. There's a 3-score lead, as we've seen all over the NFL, is never a sure thing. The best 3-score lead turns into a 4-score lead. Yes, because of today's offenses and the fact that for some reason Mitchell Trubisky turns into freaking Aaron Rodgers when he plays the Lions. And it happened again. And
the Lions were were down to their starting quarterbacks. They didn't dress Okudah. So maybe it was a decision that I know he's a rookie and everything, but that might of course that is hindsight. It is 2020 there because they lost guys to injury that they you never really. You can't plan for everything. I understand that.
Right.
But especially the fact that they were down 2 men on the corners. Patricia loves to play man-to-man defense. So does Unlin. And so, they knew they'd be exposed there. So why not? Why give them field position at that point and more momentum? Because the Bears already had a little bit of momentum from getting the touchdown to get them within 10. I think if the Lions had just cooled their jets, pooch punted, make Trubisky and the Bears have a longer field, take more time. You're still down 2 scores. You're still up 2 scores. Granted, it's 10 instead of 13. Right. But it's not that big of a difference between being up 10 and 13 at that point. Given that if you were to just the trade-off is you're gaining field position and the clock is on your side. But what you ended up doing was getting no points, giving them field position, and not taking and giving them less field to go on to take up less time. So it was just a lose situation on that decision.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of leads us to Matt Patricia, because you had mentioned the coverage and the fact that they had lost cornerbacks. Well, it's the Bears brought up after the game, because if you looked at the numbers for the first 3 quarters, Mitchell Trubisky played like David Blau, or maybe a bad David Blau. And in the fourth quarter, as I said, looked like Aaron Rodgers. And the Bears themselves said in the postgame that they knew when things get tough, when Patricia goes into a shell in the fourth quarter, which has become his it's a trend at this point. It's what he does. They knew that because in the first 3 quarters, apparently they switched off coverages, different zone coverages. They would play man, they'd play zone, different zones. But in the fourth, he always goes straight man-to-man. Even though, as you said, they were down 3 corners. 2 got hurt in the game, and Okudah didn't dress because of an injury. So apparently the Lions corners on the field were the number 2 corner, and then your 5 and 6 corner. And you're going man defense? And as we saw, Trubisky tore it up because the Bears ran 15 plays in the fourth quarter and scored 3 touchdowns. I think that kind of tells you that maybe maybe after the first, when Trubisky was able to take him right down the field, no problem, maybe you should change things up. But that seems to become the MO of Matt Patricia. He has so bought into his "I'm the smartest guy in the room" mantra that at this point, a tiger's not going to change his stripes at this point. He is what he is, and the league has figured it out. And we saw it again with the Bears on Sunday. They knew what Patricia was going to do. They took advantage of that, and they went from having a 1.7% chance to win in the fourth quarter to walking away with a divisional win. And a lot of people saying this was a must-win for the Lions because, well, here we are talking about what trouble they're in already.
Well, they weren't going to make the playoffs this year anyway. I mean, they're not a very good.
Oh, you burst my bubble already. God damn it, Greg.
They don't have the defense still. They don't have. They don't have. They had a little bit of pass rush on Trubisky at times, but they don't have the pass rush still.
That's another thing. There was next to no pressure.
Playmakers in the front 7. They're just still not good enough. I mean, they were gashed on the ground, especially in the first half. I thought, frankly, the fact that Bears only had 6 points at halftime was phenomenal, given how many yards they had. They got a lot. They chunked out a lot of yardage. I thought the Lions were very soft defensively. I thought they were soft against the run. Mm-hmm. There wasn't much going on there. And so when you're calling upon them now to make a stop in the fourth quarter, they just don't have the personnel to do it. They're still not. They're just still not a very good football team. That's just the way it is. Good football teams don't lose games like that, certainly. It doesn't mean the Bears are a good football team. Let's put it this way. Good teams don't blow games like that. The fact that you can win a game like that if you're the Bears doesn't mean that you're a good football team necessarily. It means that the team that lost it isn't very good. And, they'll probably win 5 games. I would think they might win 5 games. I can't see them winning much more than that.
Well, let's stay on Patricia because there was another very controversial statement from Patricia after the game last night. And I believe it was asked by Michael Rossi at ESPN, who seemingly has a knack for pushing Patricia's buttons. And he asked a question about if coaching has been playing into all these fourth quarter collapses. Because if you look at the numbers, Lions have 9 wins in the Patricia era. I think he's got like 11, 12. No, his fourth quarter collapses where the Lions had to lead in the fourth quarter and lost. is in the teens. They've had more fourth quarter collapses than wins over the past 2 years and one game with Matt Patricia. And Patricia responded by taking credit for what he called the best fourth quarter call ever. And he's obviously referring to the Malcolm Butler interception in the last play of Super Bowl 49, where everybody thought that the Seattle was going to run the ball in. Instead, they threw the ball. Butler made a play and ended the game. And Patricia is taking... So his defense, Greg, for... that he is not to blame for what's going on with the Lions, specifically in the fourth quarter, is that he made one play call 5 years ago that might have won the game, but who knows? I think that plays all Butler more than it is than Matt Patricia, right. And yet here we are. That is his defense, is that what I did, essentially his defense is what I did with the Patriots. And the problem is with that defense, Greg, is looking more and more, as we've seen over and over again with Patriots assistants. The reason the Patriots win is because it's Bill Belichick, not because of Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien, or whomever who's been hired out of that organization. So that quote, Greg, kind of went over like a lead balloon with the Lions fan base. It just came off as arrogant, kind of clueless, and once again, it gives off that I'm the smartest man in the room vibe. And it does not come off very well, especially when you're coming off another blown lead.
If you remember at the very end of the Jim Schwartz era, I think he was here for 5 seasons. The very end of it, he had a moment. There was a game against the Giants. It was a home game. There was a moment where I think it went into overtime, and the Lions had gotten the ball late in the fourth quarter. Not great field position, but there was a little bit of time left, and I think the game was tied. And so he ran very conservatively, ran the clock out, and the fans booed and so forth. And if you remember, Schwartz reacted to the fans with some sort of I'm not sure if he gave them the finger or he did some. Clearly, he was jawing. Yeah. He did something. There was an incident with the fans, if you remember, on the sidelines, because he was not happy with the way they were reacting to his decision to run the clock out instead of trying to win the game in regulation. And those are the kinds of things, Al, that they give you and that was in just a few weeks later he was fired.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that when they happen, because Schwartz had never had that I can recall any sort of run-ins with the fans. I know he had a run-in with Jim Harbaugh after a game, but there was no animosity that I can recall toward the fans and so forth. When the fans and the coach start to get into it like that, that's usually a sign that things are nearing its end. And this kind of thing with Patricia, that is almost it's a cringeworthy comment. It's almost sad to hear him say that. Now that's the kind of thing that somebody who's flailing, and this is only after week 1, somebody who's flailing, it's unfortunate that he didn't take that opportunity to say, that's on me. We got to do a better job. Right.
As infuriating it is to hear that, it would have been a better answer.
Yeah, it's not. And a guy who's 9-24-1 or whatever he is, you're just not going to get a lot of. You don't have the cash as a head coach, to call upon things like that. That was unfortunate. But that's going to be long forgotten. It's a long season. Yeah. But if that kind of trend continues, where he becomes very defensive and very more and more arrogant and more defiant, then it's going to be a sign that he's probably not here for very long.
Yeah. For some reason, it reminded me of whenever Al Bundy was pressured into his bona fides, he'd always say he scored 4 touchdowns in the championship game for Polk High. So it's very similar, at least comes to me, that he always falls back on what he did with the Patriots, even though you can. Well,
he can't fall back on anything he's done with the Lions.
Exactly, bingo. And you have to. Patricia has gotten better when it comes to some of his interactions when it comes to the media and how he comes across with the fan base, and like how he came across in the draft, all the video stuff he's done. But when it comes to the in-game stuff and some of the stuff we're talking about when it comes to not even just X's and O's, but overall philosophy, the arrogance just seeps out of him. And there's the bad arrogance when you've actually earned the arrogance is bad enough, but when you're arrogant and don't deserve to be arrogant, it's insufferable. And that's how Patricia comes across whenever he is pressed about why he can't fix the team. And at this point, I don't see that change at all because he is who he is at this point.
Well, I mean, some guys just their comfort zone is that little coordinator space. That's
exactly,
and that's what they're good at. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's still a prestigious job in the NFL is to be a coordinator. It's nothing to sneeze at. Mm-hmm. Some guys are just better in that regard. I can't explain it. I can't explain why there's been so many collapses in the fourth quarter. I know it's easy to want to just say it's all Patricia. It's easy to say it's play calling and so forth. I just think that there's just not enough players on that team.
Well, bringing up about the fourth quarter,
a lot of that have experienced a winning culture, and starting with the quarterback. I mean, let's face it.
I was just going to say that. Let's go to Matt Stafford then.
I mean, it's you can't put all of these at his feet, of course, because that's not fair. But all I know is that good teams, good quarterbacks, it just doesn't happen to them. I that's all I can go. I can only go by Al who it doesn't happen to. And I think it's a lot easier to explain or to explain why teams are good than why teams are bad. And why teams are good is they don't do these kinds of things. They just don't. I mean, and why certain quarterbacks are in a certain level above others is because they don't allow it to happen either.
Yeah.
You can't run around talking about all the fourth quarter leads that Tom Brady has lost or Aaron Rodgers has lost or the Packers have lost and so forth. Some teams just don't have that proclivity. And they may not always win 10, 11 games every year, but the games they do lose, it's not because they've blown them, necessarily. I mean, you've heard me say over and over that more NFL games are lost way more than they're won. Mm-hmm. But I think the teams that do the losing are the ones that end up with the losing records at the end of the year. Yep. I think teams that win games 11 that are 11-5, 12-4, and so on aren't teams that are pulling games out at the end. I mean, I know that sounds romantic. It's romantic to say that. This isn't baseball like the '68 Tigers where you pull a bunch of games on the late innings. I think it seems romantic to say, well, all these great teams throughout history must always have had all these fourth quarter comebacks. No, the good teams in NFL history are good because they don't blow fourth quarter leads. That's what it is. It's not that they're coming from behind all the time to win. It's that they're never coming ahead to lose. And that's what the difference is between a good NFL team that wins consistently and will win 10, 11, 12 games and a team that does not, that wins 5, 6 or less games. It's because those are the teams that are blowing the leads in the late going, that are not making the big plays. Mm-hmm. To keep drives alive and do all the things you need to do to have that killer instinct. Those are the teams that win games now. It's not the teams that are coming from behind like the cardiac kids. That doesn't happen very often. That's a myth.
It's unsustainable. You cannot sustain
winning teams aren't full of all these fourth quarter comebacks because they don't need it. Mm-hmm. All they need to do is get a lead and keep it. That's how you win football games in the NFL. And the teams that don't will be the ones that will always be the bottom feeders.
Yeah, and as much fun as it was watching Stafford and the Lions of all those comebacks, what was it, 3-4 years ago? I think he had, 7 fourth quarter comebacks that year? It's unsustainable. You cannot base your...
And where did it get them, really?
The next year, yeah. They missed the playoffs and Caldwell was fired. Yeah. So it was, it's fun, but it's unsustainable. There's a reason why those kind of games are essentially coin flip. And in that 1 year... They won every coin flip, and that doesn't happen. Those games usually go 50-50 at best. But that 1 year they didn't, and And as you said, if you're constantly scrambling in the fourth quarter, it's going to... You just can't... It just doesn't work every game. You just can't do it. You can't live like that. And as we saw with Stafford,
if you want to use a baseball analogy, to what I was just saying, think of the year that the Royals won the World Series. I think it was 2015 when they won the World Series. Why? And look at the 1990 Reds when they won the World Series. And neither of those teams were preseason were necessarily picked to win the World Series. But one of the big reasons they did wasn't because of ninth inning comebacks, eighth inning comebacks. Is because once their team got the lead, they had that.
Yeah, the game was over in the sixth inning.
It was right. Once the Royals got the lead after 6 innings, it was over because they had that great bullpen, which to your point is not sustainable either.
Exactly.
Bullpens typically, if you get catch lightning in a bottle one year, that's great. But the Reds in 1990 with Dibble and Charlton and I think it was
Nasty Boys. Yeah, the Nasty Boys.
Once they got the lead after 6, 7 innings, it was over. That's how you win. It's not from coming from behind. It's from getting a lead and not losing it. Yeah. And if you want to look at the NFL, it's like the team that has the best bullpen, which is we're not going to let a lead slip away. Those are the teams that are going to win.
Yeah. Yeah, and getting back to Stafford, cut him a little bit of slack. He was coming off approximately a 10-month playoff because when he got hurt early November last year.
Yeah.
But Stafford was Stafford. Long stretches of good to great play, where he makes throws that hardly anybody else in the league can make. He makes the same throws that that Pat Mahomes makes, for example. I mean, he makes lights out throws, but there's always a few mistakes that ultimately kneecap the Lions, and in this game they happened in the fourth quarter. One was the sack he shouldn't have taken, which we talked about earlier, and then the other was and we've seen this again and again with Stafford, his arm is so good, he thinks he can put a ball into a slot the size of a damn envelope. And in that fourth quarter pick that set up the Bears winning touchdown, there was no slot there. He tried to force the ball in the double coverage. Someone got their arm out. It turned into a tip ball drill. Bears got the ball in Lions territory. 3 plays later, Bears have the lead. But how many times, again, have we seen that from Stafford as well? Is that I'm thrilled having a guy who is so confident in his abilities that he can make any and every throw. The problem is sometimes you have to realize that you can't make that throw. All you need to do sometimes is you need to be the throw it away, you dump it off. If your first couple options aren't there, find a better thing to do than try to force it. He forced it, and it resulted in ultimately in the loss. But again, that might also come down to, Greg, the fact that maybe Stafford thinks that the only way this team is going to ultimately win games if he does it on the power of his right arm, and that kind of forces him into taking chances he may not normally take, or it feels like he's forced to take because he feels, if I don't take these risks, we're not going to win anyway. So I don't know if it's a catch-22 with Stafford, but it seems to be a common issue of him where when he makes a mistake, and sometimes it's damn catastrophic, and it happens at the worst times.
Well, yeah, that's all true. Everything you just said is true. But why can't the defense? And this is where the good teams rise to the occasion. Why can't the defense then? Okay, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct. He forced the ball, ended up being a turnover. Absolutely correct. But what's to say the defense can't go out there and still win the game? What's to say they can't go out there and make a big play or sack Trubisky?
But that also plays into maybe Stafford thought Stafford's not no dummy. He probably saw, I don't think this team's going to stop him. So, again, that kind of goes both ways, that Stafford sees that his defense is falling apart and that they've lost the 2 of the starting cornerbacks and they're in trouble. Maybe he feels that he has to make up for that defense. But as you said, it would be nice if, for a team that hired a defensive guru, if that defense would actually pick up the slack for Stafford occasionally, and we have yet to see it in over 2 years now. So that is a good point, because it kind of goes both ways. You have a quarterback who feels like he needs to make plays because there's a defense that doesn't make plays. Because how many playmakers are there on that defense? I mean, realistic, NFL playmakers.
None.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some guys that are pretty good. I mean,
they're good. Yeah, that could play on any team like Trey Flowers.
Every NFL team, Al, even the team that wins 2 games, has some pretty good players on it. I mean, you don't make the NFL. I don't care what kind of team you are. Yeah. You don't make this league if you're not good. I mean, let's put that. That's number one. Obviously, the teams that win have a lot more playmakers than the ones that don't. Right. But every team has got some pretty good players. I mean, you know, you can even go through the list of the Lions. You and I have been following this team for 50 years. Yeah. We could pick out players from teams that weren't very good. Yeah. From the Lions that were pretty good football players. So you're going to have good players. Okay. So, but to your question was, how many playmakers, I mean, really just flat out playmakers do they have on the defense? And I would submit to you the answer is none. I think that there are a lot of players that as a unit could be decent if they all play together and all fill their roles. But you're right. There's not that 1 or 2 guys that you really have to game plan for. That I mean, Flowers is okay. Yeah. But there's not really a lot of guys out there. Jamie Collins, of course, he got ejected. But there's some guys here that are okay. They're pretty good. But they're not guys that strike fear into an offensive coordinator. They're not guys that are going to make you, we got to pay attention to this guy, or somebody who just flat out makes these plays. Like even the Bears have Mack and other guys who can just flat out make plays. Now they can go silent for long stretches of time, which is another hallmark of great players. They can be silent for long stretches of time. You kind of forget about them. But then when the situation, they're able to bob to the surface when the situation calls for it to make a play to help save a game. I mean, that's what those players do. And the Lions don't have anybody like that. There's nobody out there that strikes fear in anybody. Nobody who's going to disrupt things. There's not a disruptor really in that defense. So no, I mean that's why. I mean it's easy to diagnose what the problem is. It's not so easy to fix. I understand that. I get it. But to me, it's easy to diagnose. Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Adrian Peterson, because I wasn't sure about that pickup. I go, why? You know, the guy's 35 years old. I don't think he's got a lot of tread left on the tires yet. He was probably the Lions' best player on Sunday. He had 14 attempts, 93 yards on the ground, not 6.6 yards per carry, which is freaking awesome. You know, and he was picked off the Washington football team's. I mean, I had to correct myself from saying Redskins, thank God that racist nickname is gone, by the way. But he was picked off Washington's scrap heap. And what does it say about the Lions' roster management and drafting? That a 35-year-old running back, you know, as good as he is, though he is going to be in the Hall of Fame, he immediately becomes their number 1 running back, despite using, I believe, 5 draft picks over the past 3 drafts, and 2 of those high in the second round. One of them they traded up for to take running backs. Yet they pick up a guy off the scrap heap, and he immediately becomes their number 1 running back. You know, as good as a pickup as he was, at least for one game, we'll see if he can hold up over an entire season, because he is, you know, he's had a lot of miles on the odometer of him. Right. What does it say about the use of draft picks and roster management of all this? They've been desperately trying to find running backs, and yet it looks like the best one of all is a guy they picked up off the scrap heap, and he was more effective than Kerryon Johnson, more effective than DeAndre Swift, more effective than Ty Johnson, more effective than all these guys that they have drafted over the years. I mean, yeah, great. They found looks like they found a guy who still can be productive, at least for this year. But what does it say about drafting running backs in the second round if a 35-year-old is beating them out?
And he's running behind the same offensive line.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, the offensive line, I will say that I think that Bob Quinn has done a pretty good job in cobbling together. Now, he hasn't done it the most efficient way necessarily. Or the cheap,
a lot of draft picks there as well.
But he has, I think, put together. I think that line is decent. I think it's okay. I think it's a line you can win with. I think they've got some stalwarts on there. Decker, I think Ragnow is going to be a good one.
Yeah, and Decker just got a long-term extension. So
Glasgow, I think they've got some talent on that line. I know Crosby got dinged for a couple of penalties.
Yeah, and the guy and their big free agent signing was Vitaly. He didn't play because he was hurt. So, but they still look respectable. Yeah.
I think the line is going to be okay. I mean, I think that's one of the units on the team that is a serviceable, maybe even upper third in the league unit. I mean, it's the potential. They've got a lot of. For the most part, they're young.
Yeah,
they've played together now for a couple of years, 2-3 years, and I think that'll be okay. Peterson's Peterson. I mean, he's that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
you can already see he has better vision than all these other backs.
Guys, these young kids, Swift and Johnson and so forth, to a Hall of Famer. And I know about his age and everything, but you look at guys. Some guys are just freaks that way. Gore, Frank Gore, he was another one. Some guys can just do it, deep into the 30s. I mean, what can you say? I thought Peterson showed incredible quickness. I thought he did there were a couple moves when he just very quickly brought made a move upfield.
Yeah, there were some plays there. If it was 25-year-old Peterson, they're home run balls.
Yeah,
instead of 20-yard runs.
Hey, 12, 14, 15, 19 yards.
Right.
And Jonathan Vilma, who should know because he's played against Peterson for years on the defense, said, look, this is the Peterson that used to give me nightmares. Yeah. The way he can hit a hole, he said, nobody hits a hole as hard as this guy does. And, I think, I know what you're saying, but it also, I guess, is hats off to Bob Quinn to pick up a guy like that. Like you said, though, you'll have to see how he – they have to watch his carries. They have to watch his touches.
He only had 14 carries. I don't think you want him pounding the ball 20 carries a game. You don't.
14 carries is, kind of pick and choose your spots with him.
Right.
He caught a few balls out of the backfield. I thought he looked very strong. I mean, again, it's week one. I understand that.
Right.
But they're gonna have to monitor his touches. But they're going to go running back by committee, which I'm okay with because that's the way it is. A lot of teams do that now. But you look at the way he ran, Al, versus the way Johnson and Swift ran. I know the other guys didn't get nearly as many carries as Peterson did. I understand that. And Swift did get a touchdown for sure. I understand that too. But you're comparing a Hall of Famer to two. One's a rookie, one's a third-year guy who's been hurt for his first 2 years. So it's hard to make that comparison. But Peterson is showing why he's a first-time Hall of Fame. As soon as he's eligible, he's going to Hall of Fame immediately.
Yeah, I guess the point I'm making, though, is that they really need to burn second-round picks on backs when there are guys, maybe not at Peterson's level, but kind of close to it, available in free agency every year, and not going for outrageous amounts of money.
That's fair.
I think that's more the question I'm looking at there.
That's a tough one because the running game has been so maligned in Detroit that you get almost desperate to find somebody who's going to be the guy or one of the two.
Apparently, maybe third time's a charm because we've seen with LeGarrette Blount and then C.J. Anderson, who both were awful.
Yeah.
So maybe that. It was great for one game. Let's see if you can hold up over another 15. Or for that matter, if there's even a 15-game season, that's a whole other discussion anyway. But it was not. It was nice to see an effective run game, even if it was coming from a 35-year-old guy.
Right.
But before we wrap up our Lions talk, we do need to talk about the upcoming schedule because it looks kind of ugly, and that's the problem here. Where maybe next time we talk, we may be talking about a coach who's hanging on by a thread because next 3 games on tap, Greg, and then they have a bye week after that. They have an early bye. The Lions play Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in Green Bay. And the Packers look like Aaron Rodgers was vintage Aaron Rodgers on Sunday. He looked like a guy who was pissed off that his team drafted a quarterback. Then you got Kyler Murray and the Cards, who beat San Francisco on the road on Sunday. And obviously we saw what Kyler Murray did against the Lions last season. And that game's out in the West Coast. So we know how badly the Lions do on the West Coast. And then they have Drew Brees and the Saints, and Drew Brees is still Drew Brees. He's not quite the Drew Brees of 10 years ago, but he's still a goddamn good quarterback, and the Saints are always a playoff contender right now. All 3 teams are undefeated. The Lions could be 0-4, staring 0-4 in the face in a bye week coming up. We could be talking about a fan base and media screaming for a change at the head coach and GM spots if the worst case scenario happens. And looking at that schedule, I could very easily see this team being 1-3 or 0-4 after a month.
Well, I mean, there may be, but that's not going to do anything about Matt Patricia's job security whatsoever. He's gonna last the year. His fate will be determined at the end of the year. Sheila Ford Hamp came out last year and said, "Hey," maybe it wasn't her. It was somebody in the Ford family said, "Look, we're going to give these guys another year."
I would say it's her because everybody else has stepped aside.
Thing.
Yeah.
They kind of hedged on the playoff or else thing. They didn't say make the playoffs or else. It was playoff contenders, which is really stretching it because now you can take that and define that any way you want. But he's not going to get fired during the season. I mean, he's not. He's gonna, if he gets fired, it'll be after the season. Lions typically. I can't remember the last time the Lions fired a coach in the middle of the season. I don't even. The last time the Lions flat out fired a coach. Bobby Ross quit, but flat out fired a coach while the season was going on. I think you have to go back to Darryl Rogers in '88.
That's who I was going to say. I think Darryl Rogers would have been.
I don't think it's happened since then. 32 years. Yeah. So that's not their MO. And Rogers, that was just a mercy killing. He had to go. But Patricia's not going to get fired. And anybody who thinks he's going to get fired during the season is barking up the wrong tree. He's going to last the year. His fate will be determined after the season is over with. Yes, he may be 0-4. That's true. That's not going to do anything about him getting fired because at that point, what are you going to do? Season's lost at that point.
Yeah, what do you do? Give the reins to Darrell Bevell? That's about the only option they would have.
Firing an NFL coach in the middle of the season is just.
I think it's more for the fans than anything else.
Makes a lot of sense to me, but he'll if he goes, it'll be on Black Monday, like everybody else does. But But I want to ask you a question though. You're talking about teams winning on the road and so forth, and is that really a big deal now with no crowds? And I know
the problem is it's the Lions. The problem is we're talking about the Lions. Like I said earlier, that like in the NHL and the NBA, playing in the bubble, that there is no such thing as a home field advantage. I think more so with the West Coast is just the travel issues. And specifically now how traveling is such a pain. It has to be a massive pain in the ass with the COVID-19 protocols in place. I would much rather be at home. Even if you don't have to deal with the crowds and stuff, you still have to deal with all the headaches that go along with traveling in a pandemic-ridden world. So I think, if anything, if there's an issue with the Lions being on the road, I think it's going to fall more onto that kind of stuff more than having to deal with, as it would normally be, the opposition fan base and things like that. That's my feeling on it. So, I don't want to travel right now. These guys are traveling because they're being paid a hell of a lot of money to do so. I'm sure if they were given the option, they probably wouldn't want to travel either. So, I don't think road games are going. I think road games are not going to be easy just because of all the extra bullshit. I think that's the best way to put it.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. But during the course of a game, there's no. It's that crowd factor that you just don't have. Right. You don't have that. Yeah,
you don't have to deal with that so much anymore. So, I guess you could say 6 of one or half dozen of the other. That may even out in the end. But winning on the road is never easy in the NFL. Well, and it'll be interesting to track this throughout the year. See if winning percentages for road teams go up this year because of the and the thing is, though, some teams will have fans, as we saw in Kansas City, of the Kansas City fans who made complete asses of themselves. But, some teams will have fans. But you're right. And that could be considered maybe an unfair advantage because Kansas City gets fans, but Detroit's not going to have fans, So, that's kind of that's another, I would not be surprised to know how crazy things are in Arizona. I have no idea if they'll have fans or not. It would not surprise me. There may be fans in Arizona. I don't know yet. But, that is going to be kind of a thing to watch this year. Is the home field as much of an advantage this year? Because I know Vegas doesn't think so. I think they've changed their odds to reflect it. But one more thing about the NFL before we move on to the Tigers and we wrap up the show. The pumped-in crowd noise. It was awful, awful, awful. I mean, they had it to the point where it was interfering with the play-by-play, and not hearing Dick Stockton bothered me that much because Dick Stockton, talk about a play-by-play guy that's lost his fastball. No, he is not the guy he was 15 years ago, where he was one of the best. But the pumped-in crowd noise was just so annoying because it was just this drone. There was no highs and lows. There was no peaks and valleys. There was no quiet, like how things would get quiet during, like the Lions are driving. The fans would know enough, for the most part, to tone down their yelling because so Stafford could call out the plays. Or when they're in the huddle, or looks like they're going to a timeout, then the fans would calm down. This was just nothing but up here. It was always high, always up here, like you had a crowd on speed, constantly yelling. I think the best description of it I saw online was someone said, if I wanted to have a constant droning noise during a football game, I would have brought my lawnmower in the living room and fired it up and just let it run. Because that's kind of what it reminded me of. It was just always there, and it was just, I just found it very, they need to tweak it. I wish they didn't even bother, because I would rather hear what there's going on in the damn field. I think that would be a hell of a lot more interesting, being able to hear play calls, being able to hear what the players are saying as the game's going on, rather than hearing, essentially a glorified laugh track, than hearing all the, and don't even get me going on the virtual fans, which is silly, but I did not like it one bit. I hope that they're probably not going to get rid of it. I just hope, if they're not going to get rid of it, then fix it, because it was awful.
Yeah, it would have been nice for it to be a little more nuanced and like you said, it was like at one speed the whole time. There was no adjusting. There was no at first I kind of liked it because it created to me a sense of, okay, now this is really an NFL game. Right. Not that it wasn't already, but I mean, to me it made the experience watching it better. But then as the game went on, I'm like you, I just thought it was just a constant. No matter what happened on the field, the reaction was the same by the. Yeah. I think laugh track is a really good analogy. That's cringy too, by the way. When we're watching the TV show and the laughter. Oh, but yeah, no, you're right. I thought that was. We'll see if they continue to do that, but there's got to be something though. I think it is kind of odd to watch and have there be nothing. But that was a little bit too much. I agree.
Yes, and they need to find a happy spot, because right now that was just. I know some people liked it. I could not stand it. It's the other leagues seem to be doing a little bit better. They're, like I said, a little more nuance as to how they're like an MLB game. You can tell they're like when the Tigers playing, which we're going to get to now. No, when the Tigers game, it modulates. They just need to modulate the fan noise. Please modulate the fan noise. All right. Well, the Tigers, Greg, they may still be bad, but they finally starting to get a little more interesting. And it's been a roller coaster of a season. Short season, just 60 games. Hell, there's only, 3 weeks left in this? Not even 3 weeks left in the season, about 2.5 at this point. That's how quickly things have gone. And it really has been a roller coaster, because they got off to a fast start, 9-5. Then they lost 9 in a row, which in a 60-game season, where if you compare one game in a 60-game season to one game in 162, that's essentially 2.7 games. So that 9 straight in a row was equivalent to like losing 24 games in a row. That's how bad it was. But then they recovered, had an 8-2 stretch, got them back over 500 at 17-16. And I don't think the fans were really buying into it that much. They were just kind of enjoying the ride. But the Tigers are talking about, we're in the wild card time. This is an expanded playoffs. We have a chance at the postseason. And then they played some good teams again. They played Milwaukee and St. Louis, the White Sox, who look really good. And they've gone 3-10 over the last 13 games, which that stretch also includes losses of 19-0 to Milwaukee, 12-2 to St. Louis, and 14-0 to the Sox. So those losses have pretty much shut down any talk of the playoffs. Thank God for that, because they really were a small sample size mirage. This team is not. If this team played 162 games, they win 70 maybe. That's right. This is essentially how they were playing over this short part of the year. I mean, the short 60-game season. It's like how they started last year. They were hovering around 500 into May. And then the wheels fell off. Well, this year it took the wheels a little longer to fall. It took the wheels about the same amount of time to fall off. It's just that the season's almost over in a short season. But at least, Greg, we're starting to see the Tigers kind of realize that, especially when they were struggling during that 9-game losing streak, they decided we needed to bring up the kids. We saw Casey Mize come up, Tariq Skubal come up. We've seen Willie Castro, Daz Cameron, Isaac Paredes, Sergio Alcantara. No, was it Alcantara? And because of injuries and performance issues, they brought up some of their more hyped prospects, specifically the two pitchers. So, and they've had good and bad and ugly. It's been interesting anyway. So, if there's been one positive this season, Greg, I think that finally the Tigers decided with some of these players, it's time to shit or get off the pot. And they started bringing some of these guys up because I did not want to see Ivan Castro pitch anymore. God forbid they got Zimmerman back in the damn rotation again because of injuries. I've had enough seeing journeymen and used-to-bes and wannabes. I think it's some of these kids, they're at the point now where, especially someone like Daz Cameron or Christian Stewart, they're getting into their mid-20s. You're not, if you're not going to be a big league player by the time you're 24, 25, the odds of being a late bloomer are not very high. When you're a prospect, you need to start being productive by your mid-20s, and some of these guys are starting to push that. So I'm glad they started bringing some of these guys up, even, and I wasn't buying into this team being a playoff contender, but at the very least, Greg, now that they're starting to bring these guys up, the team is interesting again. Not compared to the last couple of years where it was very easy just to ignore what was going on with the Tigers because, they were just, it wasn't even just that they were bad, they were boring. And at least with guys like Mize and Skubal, they're not boring anymore. At least when they're on the mound, things like that.
Well, but they're still giving up runs by the bucketful. I mean, when they lose, I don't know, 19-0, 14-0, 14-2, 12-2. These guys don't lose games 3-2. I'll give that much to them.
Well, the starting pitching has been problematic to be generous, to say the very least. Boyd's been awful.
Right.
So
Boyd's been bad. I think Turnbull's been a nice.
But even he is what he is at this point. On a good team, Turnbull's probably a number 5.
No, I get it, but I mean, at least he's a guy that belongs on a big league mound. I mean, the other guys, I don't know, but this was always going to be about these 60 games. Were always going to be about getting some experience. I'm glad they decided to finally pull the trigger and bring some of these guys up, like you mentioned. This whole playoff thing when they were 17 and 16, and we were going to play meaningful games in September and so forth. That's fine if you want to believe that, if Gardy wants to believe that, if the players want to believe, I'm fine. That's okay. I have no problem with that. But to me, the whole 60 games was about when are they going to bring some of these kids up, get him some experience. I wasn't expecting Torkelson to be here, of course.
Right.
But the Mizes of the world, and I don't know if even Riley Green would be ready, but Mize. Skubal, some of the other guys, Paredes.
Yeah, I bet you we would have seen Manning if he hadn't gotten hurt. So
I mean, it's okay. I mean, if they get the brains kicked in a little bit, I don't subscribe to this theory, by the way, that you can't bring up a kid because you're going to kill his confidence.
Oh yeah, don't get me going on that. Yeah.
That's not. I mean, if these guys are good, they're good. I mean,
if they are so weak mentally that they can't handle some growing pains.
If they come up here and don't do so well and everything's that's going to ruin them. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at Justin Verlander's numbers in 2005 when he was brought up for a cup of coffee, and he's just one example. I can bring a bunch of examples of guys when they first came up, that whether they were pitchers or position players, that just struggled mightily in their first taste of the big leagues. Very few people.
We have a perfect example, Jeimer Candelario.
Yeah, well, we'll get into him in a second, but so many players they just need that experience. Sometimes they need to get their butts kicked a little bit because you have to. A lot of these guys, Al, came up through their careers. Well, they almost all did. They all came up through the ranks as the best player on their high school team, sometimes the very best player on their college team, always the big man on campus, always the one that they were always a man playing among boys all the time. And then it's not a bad thing for them to all of a sudden be a small fish in a big pond. I don't get it. I don't know why we have to, they have to sometimes get a taste of what it's like to not always be successful, and that they have to work hard. That's part of being a good big leaguer. And if these guys, and frankly, Al, if it does turn out that they are, like you said, too mentally weak to handle it, well, that'll shake itself out. We'll find that out sooner or later. But to just say to not bring up a guy solely because you think it's going to ruin them, I don't get it. I don't know who is so fragile that getting kicked around a little bit. There are guys that 10 years in the big leagues they get knocked around, and there's a lot of players who are on these big league teams who can talk to these kids, whether it's the coaches or the players, their teammates, and help them along. They're not doing this alone. They're not on a tether out there in space. They have support around them. They've got teammates. They've got coaches. They've got people they can talk to. These guys don't just go out. They just don't get thrown out there and they just get left. Nobody supports them. Nobody helps them. I just think I don't understand that mentality. I really don't. I don't know who is so mentally fragile. And I can't think of too many players who have been destroyed for their entire professional career because of a cup of coffee. Who can you think of that's been brought up for a cup of coffee who was considered a good prospect, who got his butt kicked and that was it, and he was destroyed mentally? I don't get that. This is baseball. It's a tough game. Pitchers are going to go out there. They're going to get. You don't have a lot of Mike Trouts. You just don't, or Fernando Valenzuela's when he first broke in and threw shutouts left and right. That just doesn't happen very often. Yeah. More than likely, you're going to have like what Verlander went through and some other guys. They get knocked around. They have ERAs north of 6. It looks bad, and they come back and they figure it out. And that's what this is all about. So this to me, the 60-game season was never about playoffs. It was never about playing meaningful games in September. It was about giving these guys a taste of the big leagues, and to me, an invaluable taste heading into next year.
Yeah, it's it's more about 2021, 2022 at this point rather than 2020. Of
course,
and and I think it needs to be driven home that guys don't mature at the same level, so you can't expect all these guys, we're going to bring them all up at once and they're all going to be successful at the same time. It doesn't work like that.
No, of course not.
So
I'm glad you mentioned Candelario, because he was a guy that looked like he was on his last legs. He looked like you mentioned something a little while ago about guys being in their mid-20s. He looked like a guy that had kind of run out of chances, and he was. I think he was hanging on by a thread.
Yep.
And I don't think there were too many big league rosters he could have made other than Detroit's. But now he is, at least now, we don't know. He has to do it for an entire year, of course, but he's been hotter than a firecracker since the first couple of weeks of the season.
956 OPS.
He had a pretty good September so far.
Yeah. And he's hitting everything hard. And, some of it, he's going to come back. He's going to regress a little bit, because while you were his batting average in balls in play is 398, which is high. But even if it comes back to a more normal 330 or something like that, he's going to be a pretty darn good hitter. And people forget that, even though they moved him away from third because they had no one to play first when Crone got hurt,
right? The
guy is a well above average defender at third base. So, if he can even hit, give me a guy who can field the position and give me an 800 OPS at third base, you get yourself a solid big leaguer. And which is Candelario is hopefully trending that direction now, even though it took him essentially a season and a half to really get it figured out. Because if you remember, when he came up in 2018, he raked for a couple months when he first came up. Then he sucked the rest of 2018, was awful all last year. First couple weeks of this year, he struggled, and all of a sudden it clicked. Hopefully it will continue to click. We will see, but at the very least, he looks like a guy who belongs, and maybe he'll have the confidence where he's not going to go through these periods where he looks like, as you said, a guy who doesn't belong in the big leagues anymore. So, Candelario has stepped up. Victor Reyes, who I'm not completely sold on yet, he has stepped up. Willie Castro looks like he belongs. I don't know how good he's going to be. But some of these guys have stepped up their game, while you have guys like Christian Stewart. I I think the only reason the Tigers keep running them out there because they don't have anybody else at this point, and nobody, because like you said, guys like Torkelson and Green aren't even close to being ready, so they're stuck running a guy like Christian Stewart out there, who's only reason he was brought up to begin with is that he has this big power bat, yet he's hitting like 170 and slugging like 300. So there is a guy who was given an opportunity, and he is not. At least Candelario had shown flashes that he could become what he is right now. Stewart has never shown anything, and now he's essentially had one complete full season. He's had like 600 career at-bats. And he's an awful fielder, can't throw. If he's not hitting home runs, he's not a big league ball player. So at the very least, we're starting to see some of the wheat separate from the chaff this year, especially over these last few weeks. Hopefully that will continue. Daz Cameron has not shown me a damn thing either, as much as we've been sold on him. Rogers, the catcher, we were told he was going to be the next the future at the position. He can't even get out of Toledo right now. He's still down in as they call it, the alternate site. He's been wished into the cornfield. So, Dalwell Lugo, who they got for J.D. Martinez, he was released. And no one picked him up, so he's back in Toledo. So at least, Greg, we're starting to see the Tigers starting to shift things around and kind of figure things out with some of these young players. Because I think that's one thing people need to remember. Say, oh yeah, the Tigers are loaded with pitching. If one of those heralded pitchers of Mize and Manning, Faedo and Skubal, if one of them becomes a number 1 or number 2 pitcher, you did okay. I do not see all 5 of these guys becoming a rotation. It just doesn't work that way. So, and the same goes with position players and things like that. I think people are so wrapped up in the prospect thing, into prospects, thinking, yeah, they're all going to come up at once and the Tigers are going to compete. It's not going to work that way. If a third of these guys pan out as big league players, the Tigers did pretty well. And I think Tigers fans kind of need to brace themselves for that. That some of these guys, as much as they've been talked up by the team, by the media, they're going to be busts. And that's why when it comes out, the Tigers have to start spending money. Because they only have one big contract left after this year. Once Zimmerman is finally given his walking papers after this year, all they're going to have left on the payroll is Miguel Cabrera and a bunch of guys on their first contract. They can spend some money this offseason, and maybe they can start sniffing 500, and then they can start building on that. And then maybe in a couple years we have a contender. Because right now, this is not a contender. This was a small season mirage, and we should just consider ourselves lucky that we're finally starting to see some of the young guys.
Well, as much as I am so reluctant to spend a lot of money on a free agent pitcher, this team really does need a genuine big league starting pitcher to kind of anchor that rotation.
Yes, they do.
To kind of be the guy. You mentioned Matt Boyd.
Boyd is not that.
Totally regressing.
I'm tired of hearing Boyd as an anchor of the rotation. No, he's not.
Right. I'm not talking about going on and getting a patchwork guy like a Ivan Nova and guys like that. I'm talking about they really do need, and again, I just hate to spend money on big money on starting pitchers, but maybe you don't have to spend a lot of big money, but they do need one guy who can go into who'll be your opening day starter of 2021. I know it's going to be tempting to start a Mize or somebody like that on opening day. And when I mean opening day starter, I mean a guy who's going to be your number 1 starter. I don't care if he's got a little bit of tread on the tire. I don't care if he's in his early 30s. But
remember in 2006, that was Kenny Rogers.
Yeah,
and he got a great year out of it.
But you need. I think this rotation, Al. I think with all these young pitchers coming up, and you're dead on when you talk about, if only a third of these guys make it and so forth. But
that might be generous. To be honest with you,
I think this rotation badly needs one guy. I mean, they need more than that, but I mean, at least one guy that can be that, just somebody that they can look at and say he's a big league starter.
He's going to give us 6-7 innings every start and give us an ERA.
Maybe an ERA around 4 or high 3s or whatever. But, a whip of 1-2. But you know what? He's a guy that we can run out there. He's been around the block. He knows he's what they call professional hitters. He's a professional pitcher. He knows his way around a mound. He's not an all-star necessarily even, but a guy that we can at least He's a big league starting pitcher, and they need that. They need a guy like that. They don't have that right now.
No.
They have, it's fine to talk about Mize and Skubal and in the future with Manning and Burroughs et al. But they need a guy that the rest of the rotation can kind of go down a notch. And I'm including Boyd in that. Maybe even Boyd could be helped if he's knocked down to 3 or 4 in the rotation because he is lefty. Yeah. But I mean, they just need a guy, Al, that they can give the ball to every 5th day and not worry about him, and a guy that you don't have to, bring the bullpen in the 4th inning. I mean, they thought they had that guy with Zimmerman. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that didn't work out. But I'm not saying you got to spend Zimmerman type money at all. Yeah. I wouldn't. But there's got to be somebody out there, and I haven't looked at the free agent list yet.
Well, let me ask you this. Michael Fulmer is coming off of both a Tommy John and knee surgery and looks like a guy who should have even been in the big leagues this year and should be rehabbing down at AAA. Any chance you think he might be that guy next year after he's – because they do say it takes up to 2 years to recover from Tommy John. It's only been about a year and a half for him.
No, I don't see it with Fulmer. I think. I mean, I know he was Rookie of the Year in 2016. I don't know. I don't see it. I think he's just. I don't see it. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. Truly, I hope I am wrong, but I don't see it. I don't like his motion. I think it's too violent. I think. At best, I think he's a number 3 guy. I don't see it.
Yeah, well, you don't see it in Fulmer. I don't see it in Boyd. I think actually, some of these guys might be better served coming out of the bullpen. Like Turnbull, for example. They say the guy's got lights out stuff, but he's never able to harness it. For 5-6 innings at a time. They say he's got number 1 starters. They got number 1 stuff, but. He's not a number 1 starter, probably never will be, because he's another guy. He's not young anymore. I think Turnbull's like 27, 28 years old at this point. So, actually, I'm going to look at that right now, see how old he is. Yeah, he's 27 years old right now. So he's not exactly a prospect at this point, a guy like Turnbull. Now, some of these guys, because a lot of the most successful relievers are failed starters. Mariano Rivera, failed starter. So maybe some of these guys we're talking about might ultimately be better served moving to the bullpen, because if I never see Joey Jimenez throw for this team again, I would be one very happy man, because I think that ship has finally sailed on him. Because can you believe that guy was an all-star, a couple years ago? Because Jimenez is literally throwing batting practice at this point. It's actually kind of sad to watch him throw at it right now. And watch this team trying to find a closer. We've seen Jimenez, we've seen Soto, I think we've seen Garcia, we've seen Farmer, all being given a high leverage innings, and none of these guys have really stepped up to the plate. So maybe one of these starters would be capable of doing so. I guess because some of these guys are still under contract, so we'll see what happens. But I'm with you that this team needs more than stopgap veterans at this point. They need more than guys who are scrambling on 1-year contracts. Like, I could see them keeping Jonathan Scope, for example. The guy has been solid this year, and they really don't have anybody in the minor leagues who extrapolates out to be a big league second baseman, for example. And Scope's only like 28, 29. So that, I can see them keeping him, but they need a few more guys like him, not on 1-year contracts, that they can help build the team around. Because, as we saw, this is, I think, as lucky as they've gotten a few times with these 1-year deals. I mean, Crone looked like a solid pickup till he got hurt, and Scope's been okay. But Ivan Nova sucked. He was bad, then he got hurt. And we've seen that with most of the pitchers they picked up on 1-year contracts. So I do kind of lean your way that if you're going to spend, obviously they need more big league bats. That's a given, but they need someone to be a rock in the rotation, because I don't see anybody on the team currently, like you're saying, because I'm not going to put that kind of pressure on the rookies. And I don't see Turnbull or Fulmer or Boyd being that guy. They need someone in that rotation who can be a rock for a couple years. Who that might be, I don't know.
And who can help teach the young kids and teach them what it's like to be a big league starting pitcher. And there's something you can only get so much from the coaches.
Because we heard that a lot about when Kenny Rogers was in Detroit those 2 years, and the young pitchers just love talking to him.
You can only get so much from the coaches. You really you can. I know Zimmerman is, he's kind of trying to fill that role with some of the other guys, but
how often is he there anyway? He's
on his way out. He's on his way out. So
Zimmerman's contract, you can make that an argument. That might be one of the worst contracts ever given in Major League Baseball history, because that's what ended up being $125 million. And you end up getting a guy giving you a 6 ERA. I don't begrudge him getting the money. That's just how things work. Right. But man, that contract. I guess I'm not going to bitch too much because it didn't really handcuff him because the team was training bad anyway. It was just Zimmerman was just one last gasp to keep that window open, and the window slammed shut. Because look what Justin Upton's doing. Justin Upton's awful now too. Yeah. And the Tigers gave him crazy money. So with that, anything else you want to add about the Tigers before we call it an evening? Call it a podcast.
No, I'm ready to call it.
Yes, you do look very tired. All right. It's been a while, so who is your jerk of the week?
Well, this might be somebody that you might have picked. It's amazing to me that we don't pick the same person very often. Because I think this is kind of low-hanging fruit, but Skip Bayless to me. Last week when he came out and said that Dak Prescott was somehow weak because he had publicly admitted to having had experienced depression in the wake of his brother's death. Yeah. Bayless went on and said, "Hey, you're the quarterback of the Cowboys. You can't show any weakness now that your teammates are going to look at you. And he kind of walked his comments back a little bit, but didn't fully do it. He didn't really apologize for them. He tried to clarify them, and I thought that that was clumsy. And sometimes, very oftentimes, that quote unquote clarification ends up making you look even worse. And I just thought that it was way out of line for him to say it. A guy like that, who it's fine to be a sports commentator, and it's fine to have opinions and so forth. But when you start talking about stuff like that, when you start talking about people's personal feelings and reactions to grief, and I just think that's totally out of bounds, off limits. And Bayless just crossed the line. It's not the first time, of course. And so he's got to be my jerk of the week.
I think Bean agrees with you there. So, but I think the worst thing to happen to sports networks is that Pardon the Interruption became successful. And then they started coming up with more and more of these debate shows. And now you got a guy like Skip Bayless who's on air 2.5 hours a day being contrarian. And who watches this stuff? I think the only people that watch these daytime debate shows, like First Take and whatever the hell the one is Skip Bayless is on Fox, are people stuck in airport bars and people in gyms. Because who would sit there and watch Skip Bayless pontificate for 2.5 hours? I just don't get the fascination. And when discussions get like that, I'm with you. These guys are so far out of their element, it exposes them, and they say stupid shit. But then again, as you also said, Skip Bayless has been saying stupid shit for years. I mean, remember, this is the guy who insinuated Troy Aikman was gay and had nothing to back it up. So, yeah, Skip Bayless is slime, and I'm with you there. I mean, that's a good one. I was thinking about, for my jerk of the week, I was thinking about just going for college football in general, for what a clusterfuck it's turned into. Between fans yelling for unpaid players to come and play for entertainment despite we're in a pandemic, and you have schools hemming and hawing. They got the Big Ten. We're not going to play. And now I'll say, well, maybe we're going to play now. We're having another vote. And then you got cancellations and, huge swaths of teams not being able to play. But I think that's a whole topic. So I'm going to hold on to that because I think we might talk about that in our next show, especially because we may have some Big Ten, Pac-12 stuff to talk about if they decide to join the fray. We'll see what happens there. So, and obviously you mentioned Skip Bayless. So I think my jerk of the week is going to be the Kansas City fan base, who I referenced earlier. who they had on the opening night for football. They always have the defending Super Bowl champion on Thursday Night Football have a home game. In this case, it was Kansas City. And they and for whatever God knows reasons in Missouri, they allow fans in the game. I think they allowed like 15,000, 16,000. This wasn't even during the Star Spangled Banner, during the national anthem. This was a moment of unity where the players in both teams locked elbows. This stuff the NFL is doing right now feels so hollow to me after how they treated Colin Kaepernick and how they went down during all that. And now all of a sudden they've done a complete 180 on all this. The NFL is the only reason the NFL is changing all this because they see how the public attitude is changing. And obviously they're a league with majority black players. But so seeing all this stuff really feels hollow and hypocritical to me. But regardless of that, players stood in line, in a moment of unity, a moment of silence for. They didn't even say Black Lives Matter. What is so political about wanting people of all races to get along and people that have the same human or basic rights? And Kansas City fans booed. Some Kansas City fans are like, "Oh, there's some people who were cheering about all of us." It sure hell sounds like that whole damn stadium was booing to me. I mean, how do you boo a moment of unity, for Christ's sake? They weren't even kneeling during the national anthem, which they have every right to do. Don't even get me going on that. But it just shows how there's so many fans of sports who are racist bigots, who are so afraid of even the smallest change in the status quo that allow people of color to have a little better life. That these people seem so afraid and so small and so angry that something as really harmless and as TV design fluff as that moment of unity was, they were so pissed off they still booed it. It just shows how there's still too many people in this country, too many people in the sports world who are essentially saying, as, what was it, Sean Hannity that said, shut up and dribble when he talked about LeBron James. The Kansas City fans were telling their own players, shut up and play football. Dance for us, play football, entertain us. That's essentially what they're doing when they're booing stuff like that. So my jerk of the week are the Kansas City fan base, and for that matter, other fans who are so pro-clutchy over athletes using their platform to give their voice to topics that are near and dear to their heart. So they're my jerk of the week. I'm tired of it. It's exhausting.
Great call. No, that's a great call. Just let everybody know that, like Al said, we'll be coming back in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what the schedule is like. Read me at my Out of Bounds WordPress blog or my Winged Wheeler WordPress blog whenever there's some hockey to write about. Nothing going on in that realm lately, but it's there if you want to. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And Al's going to tell you how to watch the show or listen to the show.
Yes, of course. Yes. We are. If you want to listen to the show, obviously if you're listening to us right now, you figured that out. But if you want to tell other people about us or you want to have other options, we are available obviously on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher Radio. We're on iHeartRadio. We are on Spotify. We are available on Google Play, the Google Podcast. You can go right to our homepage, thekneejerks.net. That will take you right to the podcast where you can click play or click download. We are also on YouTube when we don't have technical glitches, and I will upload video of us. Or, for example, today you can see it looks like Greg's kitchen, and you can see a Bass Lake behind me, because I do fancy stuff like that. But we're also on YouTube if you want to watch us there. And as things go on, I think I've actually got the podcast on a couple other providers at this point. I'll have to add that to the notes, and I'll bring it up on the next podcast because Libsyn has allowed us to syndicate to all these different places. So I will. Pretty much, if you want to find a podcast, look up the Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al, and you can find us there. Listen to us, download us, listen to us on Android, Apple, your computer, on your Roku, on your Fire Stick, whatever you want to listen to us on. We are available. And as always, click like, click subscribe, and obviously, as Greg said, follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter. We do have a Facebook page. Facebook.com, the Knee Jerks, which is a fan page. And I'm on Facebook as well. You always look me up there, but be aware that I am a raging liberal. And you won't if you lean anywhere right of center, you won't like what I have to say. But at this point, I don't give a shit anymore. I really don't. I'm tired of it. God damn, these last 6 months, Greg, have been so goddamn exhausting. Oh, I'm glad we're talking again. It gives me a place to vent.
Yeah.
Anyway, but regardless of that, we do try to keep this podcast kind of apolitical, but sometimes everything is political now. You know, for all the people who say, keep politics out of my sports. Everything's political. Sports have always been political. Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, the goddamn Olympics. Everything's political. Deal with it. And try to be on the right side of history. And being on the right side of history, well, I think if you have any common sense, you know the right side of that. So, anyway, with all that out of the way, I'm done ranting. Greg probably needs a cocktail at this point after hearing me rant for 2 hours. So, well, actually like an hour and a half, but be it that as it may. Until 2 to 3 weeks from now, we'll notify you on social media as to when that will be. This is Al Beaton saying, we'll see you then. Good evening, good night, and good luck. I don't even remember how I used to close. It's been so long. So, yeah, I should let you do it. Okay. Anyway, see you in 2 to 3 weeks. Greg, go ahead.
Ciao, Italy, everybody. We'll see you in 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, we'll see everybody.